All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the Delta DNA webinar series. My name's Isaac. I'm head of analytics here at Delta DNA, and today we're going to go through Slice and Dice. Some of you have probably heard me talk about Slice and Dice a few times before. What we're going to do today is a little bit different. So we're going to cover some of the new features that have just come into Slice and Dice that you can use right now. And we're also going to look at some up-and-coming features which are going to make the next release, which hopefully should be towards the end of this month. So we're going to cover off a bunch of really exciting new stuff that you can do in Slice and Dice that you weren't able to do before. Of course, I'll take you through a bit of intro of some of the other things which are already there and I've already talked about in previous webinars. But the focus of this will really be some upcoming stuff which you can get excited about. And so to enable that, actually, we're using what we call our staging environment of Delta DNA today. So this won't look exactly like what your Slice and Dice looks like right now, but this is what your Slice and Dice should look like in the very near future. So just for people who haven't seen Slice and Dice before, we'll do a kind of quick intro again. So here we are in Slice and Dice. We're using the Delta Crunch game, which we always use for our demonstrations and testing and this sort of thing. All of you should have Delta Crunch available to you, and it's populated with loads of data that you can play around with. So let's get started by looking at a very simple, well, let's look at the interface for Slice and Dice Festival. So what we have here is that Slice and Dice looks at columns versus rows, and in particular dimensions versus measures. So the dimensions will be, from the events table, will be any of the fields that you send us. So things like the event name, converted product amounts, device names, anything which appears as a parameter in your data will appear in these dimensions. And what you can do is define measures based on those. So you can add a measure, and you can add it as anything based on one of the dimensions, and these will be aggregate types of things. So for instance, one of the most common ones you might do is to say, look at the sum of the total converted product amount, which would be a sum of the total amount that people have spent in your game. You could also look at an average. You can do counts as well, so counts tend to be quite useful if you're looking at, say, user IDs. So you can do, not that user ID, you can do a count of the unique number of users that have done something, or you can do a total count of number of users, and similarly you can do session IDs and that sort of thing. So those are the measures. I should have pointed out that there's two tables that Slice and Dice can look at. It can look at the events table, which is simply the raw data that you've sent to us. There's 31 days available in Slice and Dice if you're on demand. If you're on Go, you can have a look at just the previous day of data in your events table. But this is every single event that your game has sent us, the very raw data. There's also a user table. What this is a snapshot of every single player we've ever seen in your game, what their metrics look like as of today or yesterday, depending on what time it is. So, and in here we have kind of aggregates of what kind of things those players have done. So like I said, we have every single player that's ever played your game. We have things like the session lengths for that player. We have the average number of minutes per session in the last 7 days. We have total days played. We have total sessions played. These kind of aggregate level things that you can do. And of course, we have automated metrics on every field that you send us. So for every event, we count how many times that event's been seen for that player. And we also look at the first and last values for every string field. So here we have lots of attribution events. We're looking at the first and last value of those. And then for every integer or numeric field, we look at the sum and the min and the max of those. So for instance, you can look at what the maximum spend was by looking at the converted product amount max field. And similarly, you can look at what the last value. So here the max would be the most that someone's ever spent, and then the last would be the last time that they spent. And of course, if these have never been populated before, they'll just be null values. So that's the user table. I mean, today what I want to focus on is a couple of new features we've put into the events table. But first, let's just have a look at a very kind of simple query. So we can build, the whole point of Slice and Dice is that you're building SQL queries that will go against our Vertica database, and then they'll populate this interface with some stuff that you can look at in a table or in terms of a chart. So let's just make a very simple one, which is the mission funnel for Delta Crunch. So if we grab a dimension of mission name, which is in here somewhere. So here's our mission name. We can chuck that up in here. And then we look at the count of the unique users. So on this one. And then we also want to make sure that we're looking at the mission names in the right context. So if we add then a filter on the event name, so where's the event name? There it is. So there's the event name, and we can put a filter on that to make sure we're just looking at, say, mission completed events, as opposed to, say, mission started or mission failed events. So let's just have a look at how many people are completing each mission. So if we run that, we'll get a table of the mission names and how many people have completed them. We can look at that as a chart. You can see that these are out of order. We can order them by either the columns or the rows. So if we ordered by the mission name, that would give us an alphabetical listing. So you do an order by clicking these triangles. So you can order by descending or ascending. So this will give us our alphabetical ordering of our mission names. So that's going backward in descending order. So we can do it from that's from Z to A. So we can do it the other way if we want. But of course, that may not be the most useful way to order it. So in terms of this one, we're looking at a funnel of how many people have been through each mission. So maybe we want to look at the number of unique users. And we'll see here now that we have a nice funnel of people flowing through our missions from the very first mission in Delta Crunch, which is this first time user forest #1 mission. So that's a very, very simple query in Slice and Dice. We can give that a name. So we'll call it webinar. If I can spell, webinar mission funnel. And then we can save that. Oh, there's already one. Like we'll call that. I already done this example before. We'll call that #2. So now we save that, and of course you can go in here and you can open any of your previous Slice and Dice queries. What's neat now is that it shows you which custom dashboards those queries appear on, so that if you edit them, you'll understand which custom dashboards you're changing. And you can see there's a long list here, and some of these are ones that we've created, and some of them are ones which come preset before you do anything. The other cool thing you can do is you can look at the SQL behind. Nope, that doesn't work. I need to save it. Need to run it. We can look at the SQL. Oop, that one doesn't work. Okay, there's some problems with using this staging environment, that some of the things don't necessarily work exactly the way you think you're going to. But anyway, you should be able to look at the SQL behind the query, and then of course you could copy and paste that into direct access. And that would give you exactly the same results as you get in Slice and Dice. But as I said, because this is the development staging environment, some of those things don't work quite properly yet. But in your one on live, you should definitely be able to see the export SQL and also the export CSV, where you can save this table as a CSV. So that's kind of the traditional Slice and Dice. What we want to do now is have a look at some of the cool new features we've added recently. So in the last release, we added a really cool feature which is called counters. So what that allows you to do is to count up the number of times a particular thing has happened for each user, or for each user in each session, and then you can reference that to get some information back. So just to kind of demonstrate how this works, let's start a new query. So what? So one of the really useful use cases for this is looking at the number of in-app purchases. So let's add a dimension, and we'll add a counter. So the first way to make a counter is to add a dimension and set this type to counter. And then it'll ask us what we want to count by. So we can count how many times this thing has happened to a user. We can count how many times this thing's happened to a user on a given day, or on any day. And we can count how many times this happened to a user on a given day in a given session. But let's just keep that at user for now, because what we're going to do is we're going to count the number of in-app purchases that a player has made. So we'll call this in-app purchase counter. Okay, so then what happens is that what this counter will do is look at the number of times a certain set of criteria have been satisfied and just count those up. So what we need to do is set in here we need to set the event name to be equal to a transaction event, because that's when people make in-app purchases. And then we need to say that the product category is equal to real currency. So what this is going to do is it's going to count up every single time someone's made a real currency transaction. So we add that counter. Okay, and we should have it down the bottom of our list now. So we can grab our in-app purchase counter, drag it over here, and then let's just say grab the number of unique users. And what this will tell us now is how many purchases, well, how many, we'll put an order by on this. Yeah, make that ascending, and we'll give it a chart. This will tell us a distribution of people in terms of the number of purchases. So obviously most people have not made any purchases, but then we see that 3,000 players have made one purchase, 3,600 players made one purchase, around 3,000 have made two purchases, so on and so forth. Now, of course, this is for all the players in our data, and it's more useful if we put in some restrictions. So let's say we want people who have installed recently. So we grab the GA user start date and put it into the filters. We can say, okay, tell me all the people who have started in the last 7 days. Okay, so now we're looking at distribution of in-app purchases for people who've installed in the last 7 days. And you can see, of course, the vast majority of those people have not made a purchase, but then 59 have made one purchase, and if we look here, 12 have made two purchases, and so on. So you can see this is really, really useful because we're looking directly at something which is really interesting for us. What's the distribution in terms of in-app purchases? We can get rid of this big bar of zeros if we want by just reducing this segment to spenders. Nope, how can we have... Okay, these are people who spent in the past. But anyway, you can see, so we can reduce that down to just giving us the people who are spenders and not including the non-spenders. I should have pointed out that the way that the counters work is a funnel. So of course, what's happened is that for each of these players, at some point they would have had a count of 0 in-app purchases. And then they've made a purchase, so then they went to 1, and then it's the people that made 2 purchases went to 2, people that made 3 purchases went to 3. So this is not a distribution, but it's more of a funnel. So you can see that here with this filter on that. Of course, all the people who went on to spend at some point when they first installed, they had a count of purchase of 0. And so we have here 49 people have made at least one purchase. 12 people have made at least 2 purchases, 6 people have made at least 3 purchases, but these 6 and 12 are in this initial count here, so it's a funnel in terms of the number of purchases, because this is a counter across the events table. So the other cool thing you can do here is you don't have to just use this as a dimension, as a kind of row, you can use it as a filter. So let's say we drag that into the filter bar. Oh, we have to do it this way. Sorry. So if we put that into the filter bar, we can do stuff like look at, say, just the first purchase. So now we're only going to be pulling out the rows for users when they were at their first purchase. So if we put that in there like that, we can then say look at what was, let's grab something like user level. So if we run this, now we'll be seeing, okay, what was the distribution of levels when people made their first purchase? Or while they're at purchase number 1. And you see most people in this, well, let's do some order buys just to make this a bit neater. So we can see from here, most people are making their purchase when they're at level 0. But there's a reasonable number that make it at 1 or 2 or so on. Right, so that's how to use the counters. Like I said, you can use them as a row, as in you can plot against them, or you can use them as a filter to get exactly what point in time you're after. And so here in this example, we're just going to pull out all the time when people were at their first purchase. So I wonder if we can actually look at the SQL for this. Okay, here we go. So on this one, we can see that now the SQL viewer is working. So actually, one of the cool things here, which is only a little feature, but some people might have noticed that now there's color coding in the SQL viewer, so that you can see the different commands and functions and such color coded in a more easy to read fashion. But one nice thing here is that if you wanted to see how these counters work, you can just pull this query SQL up, and the kind of heart of it here is this conditional true event function. And you can see if you read the SQL in here, what it's saying is conditional true event name equals transaction, product category equals real currency. So you can recognize that as what we set up in the counter. And so this is what actually Vertica is doing, or this is the command that's going to Vertica to enable this counter to be set up. And so you can use this function yourself in your own direct access queries to simulate the same effect. In fact, you can use it in many powerful ways to add counters of any kind to any queries you like. But what we're doing here in our Slice and Dice is automatically adding that to the query which drives Slice and Dice, such that you have it available for you to use. So I'd encourage people who are interested in direct access and looking and during their own SQL to have a look at how these queries are auto-generated by Slice and Dice, and you can copy and paste them into direct access and play around with them. Next week, or in the webinar, not next week, the week after next, so in 2 weeks' time, we're going to talk about some best ways to use SQL against direct access. And one of the things I'll talk about would be how to use these conditional true event and similar functions, which are called window functions in Vertica, to really get deep insights into your data. But we'll just put that to the side for now. So the next thing I want to show people after counters. So actually, I should point out that counters are available now. So they were part of the last release. So you can go into your current Slice and Dice and start playing around with these counters and using them to get back things that you would never been able to find out before. But what I want to do now is show you some new things which we've added, which will be in the next release. So one of the cool things we've added is a couple of new dimensions. So the first of those, let's just start a new query to save us some time. So one of the first things one of the cool things about it is called a day since install. So what this does is simply works out how many days it's been since the player's install, and it adds that to every row. So what this means is that you can really easily combine together users which which installed on different days and analyze them in a consistent fashion. So we can do stuff now like let's say look at the something simple like the average level, say. So let's take the user level. Where's my user level? Under U, I guess. User level. I'll take an average of that. Cool. All right, so now we're going to look at the average user level as a function of day. We'll chuck that order by on. And we'll put a plot on here. Right, and so now we'll do it with a nice little line chart. And now we can see how the average user level in our game goes up as a function of what day people are on. And we'd see this kind of nice steady increase that we would expect. You can put any kind of stuff in here. So, of course, the obvious one is to chuck in the number of users. Like there's a bar chart. And so here we are seeing this is essentially our retention. So how many players we're keeping on each day. And so we can only really do on each day since install. So one of the nice things here is that so you can see the number of people who are turning up on each day, but really what we would like to be able to do is look at this y-axis as a percentage, and that's another new feature that we've added, which is this percentage button. So if I click this and I rerun the query, what that'll do is will normalize the chart by the sum of the total unique users. And so here now we have our retention. So sorry, this is not working completely as retention because I haven't just taken new players. So let's take so obviously there's players that have played in our data window which are not new players because we only have 31 days of data. So let's grab the start dates. Make sure they're in the last 31 days and then run it again. Okay, so now we see on day 0 that we have 100% of players like we'd expect because our day 0 retention has to be 100%. And then we can immediately see that our day 1 retention is 25%, day 2 17%, and so on. So now you can, one of the things which I think people struggled with in the past was that you couldn't measure retention in Slice and Dice. You could see your retention in the measure charts, and you could see it in the retention predictor, but you couldn't go and measure, set up a query to measure retention in Slice and Dice. And with these new features, you can, because we've added the ability to see the number of days since install, as well as the ability to normalize your results so that you're looking at something between 0 and 100% as opposed to just an absolute number. The really cool thing here is that when you add columns to the top, it normalizes by each of them sensibly. So I'm just trying to think of a good example we can chuck in here. So if we put, say, the total revenue, let's see if this one works. This will make more sense as a table. So we can see here for people this month, we've got our retention here, which is unchanged. So we've got our nice retention, day 0, 1, 2. But now we're also looking at the percentage of revenue which came on these different days. So 17% of the revenue we've seen from these players was spent on day 0, and then 4% was on day 1, and 5% was on day 2, and so on. And because we've pressed this percentage sign, it's normalizing by this total revenue now. And you can see that in the distribution, that if we added up all these days, it would add up to 100%. So we're breaking it down to who was appearing on the different days. Or how much was spent on the different days, sorry. Right, so the other new, I'll just reset this. So the other dimension we've added is the days lapsed. So what this is going to do is it's going to put the number of days it's been since that event happened to today. What that's really good for is allowing you to do arbitrary ranges in the filters. So if you've seen what I've done a few times is to take the user start date, say, and dump it in here. And so what I can do here is, of course, I can specify specific event date ranges, or I can say previous 31 or previous 7 days on this date. But what I can't do is do that for any kind of event or any kind of thing that happened. And so what the days lapsed allows you to do is exactly that. So what I can do is say, if I go back and find it, oop, I'm going the wrong way. If I grab the days lapsed and drag it in here, what I can say is only show me events which have happened in, say, the last 10 days, or in the last 5 days, say, or the last 3 days. And that'll essentially truncate your data to just be the last kind of data little window for those users. And so that's really useful if you wanted to look at some arbitrary ranges of things. So you only want to look at the amount spent in the last 10 days, or the ARPDAL for the last 10 days, or how many of a particular event happened in the last certain window. I mean, one of the cool things about these kind of things, this kind of logic, is that it makes it really easy to set up custom dashboards that you don't have to change. Because say if I want to measure ARPDAL over a 10-day window, say I can put days lapsed 10 there. I can put the days lapsed in here. I can measure the total users, so total unique users, and then can I do ARPDAL? Maybe I can't get exactly ARPDAL, but I can definitely measure things like total number of users and total number of sessions. And then here we'd be looking at, oops, I did it the wrong way. I need this to be less than. So now I'm looking at the total number of users and sessions seen for the last 10 days. And this was, of course, a moving window. Every time this query runs, it's just going to look at the last 10 days of data. Okay, so I'm just trying to look at my list of other cool examples I was going to show you. So I've shown you how to do the the retention in Slice and Dice, you can put it all together, so you can use the counters and the normalization features and the days since stuff to make really cool charts now. So one of the really good ones you can do now is number of days to first payment. So we can put this one in here, and we've set this to 1 again. So that equal to 1. And then we can do days since install, and we can do unique users. You can run that. Actually, we better chuck in the start date filter again. Okay, so we'll do that. So now we're looking at the days since install to first payment, and we can change that to anything we like. So we can change that to second payment, and we can run it again. And you see now that when we did it before, the typical first payment day was the first day, but now actually in this game we can see that people make a second payment between day sort of 5 and day 15, and of course you can change this to anything you like. So now you're starting to get deep into the playing and spending patterns of your players, right? We can tell exactly when different in-game events happened, and we can tell how many times they've happened, when does the first payment happen, when does the second payment happen. You could do other counters. There's a blog article which went up last week about how to use the counters to measure the number of mission fails. So you can look at how many times people have failed a particular mission, or how many even more complicated things like how many times people have interacted with a certain menu, say how many times they've gone to the store, or how many times they've looked at an incentivized ad or something like that. So you can, by combining all these things together now, we can get exactly what we want, which is things like the distribution of what percentage of players make their third purchase on day 13. We know now that 19% of people make their third purchase on day 13, and similarly we can do that for anything. Which is really cool. So we're getting down to really detailed numbers that we can use to design our game and understand exactly when players are doing certain things. So finally, I'll just show you a little bit how you can put these onto custom dashboards. So let's save this one just so we have it. So we'll call this days to second purchase. Save that. So I think a lot of you have seen the custom dashboard functionality. That's basically going to stay mostly the same. But I can just show you how you can put these up there. So here's a custom dashboard. Here's the webinar mission funnel. I think this isn't the last time I did the webinar on Slice and Dice. We can edit this custom dashboard to put some more Slice and Dice queries on it. So here are the the Slice and Dice queries. Here's the first purchase distribution one we just made. We can just drag that in here. We can also, where's the other one we did? Did we do retention? I think we did retention. There's retention. We can grab retention and drag that in here. Here's our days to second purchase. If we save that now, we can view all of our new charts that we just made. And every time you come to this custom dashboard, these queries will run in the background and update these distributions, so that you can see exactly the most up-to-date view of what's going on in your game. And I think this is really cool. So you can, not only can you get at the information that you need, but you can put it on this custom dashboard so it's there ready for you to see anytime that you need to look at it.
Was there anything else you want to say before we go, Isaac? Or I think you've covered
yeah, so I think,
the
only thing I'll say is that, so the counters and, the general Slice and Dice stuff and the custom dashboards are all available right now. The days since install and days lapse dimensions and the percentage, so the ability to convert things into a percentage, will be available in the next release, which will happen at the end of April. So look out for that, and when it comes online, you'll be able to do all the stuff which I showed you today.
Great stuff. Thanks, Isaac.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Cheers. Bye.